time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Well, it's good to be back. Time for another glass of brandy.
Another round.
And Reilly, what subject should we broach today?
Well, in our book, Brandy, one chapter that really stands out to a lot of people it's tip number 66. And it's about not what you say, but how you say it.
It's a good topic. And in a nutshell, what does that mean?
Yeah, and in the article, or the short little chapter, about 2 to 3 minute read, we really boiled it down to it's not so much the point you're trying to make, but really how you go about making that point. And we brought up some examples with Disney and some other brands, and so I thought it would be good for us to dive in a little deeper, a little longer than 2 to 3 minutes, and really give more context and detail and examples of how this actually applies to businesses.
Yeah, I think, the way I approach it is that everybody's a consumer, right? Every single person, every one of you listening, you're a consumer. You buy things. You engage in transactions with businesses and brands as your own. But not everybody's a business owner. Yeah. Maybe there's some of you out there that aren't business owners, but are just into the topic of branding in general. But I think because business owners are always looking at their business and what they say, they're doing it from the lens of a business. And whether it is protecting their coveted parking space in front of their business with, employee parking only, or whatever it is, or they have a policy, right? No pets allowed inside the store, or whatever it is. They're doing it from the sense of the business and what the reason is to either protect themselves or to streamline how they do things, or whatever it is. We're not going to get into the reasons for the decisions that each business makes. But I think the point is again, it's not what you're having to communicate to the consumer, it's how you're doing it. And because we're all consumers, I would say that for a lot of people to apply what we're going to get into today, it's more about looking at what you do as a business through the perspective of your customer. And for many people, that's hard to do.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a good point of the business mindset of being very, like we've mentioned before on episodes, it's very transactional. It's very to the point, very black and white, just cut and dry, versus brand is more empathetic. It's more emotional, relational. You're thinking of, okay, how does my customer or client feel in this certain scenario when they're walking in, or whatever it could be. And I think a huge part of this is that language really is a core part of it. It forms how we see things and how we interact with something. So whether that's, a restaurant saying no refills at the soda machine, they can flip that and use different language to actually make it, a softer blow, or make it into a perk, where it's implied in certain ways, but you're not just being cut and dry of like you said, no pets allowed inside.
It helps dictate how we respond.
Yeah,
if someone, and think of it just in terms of a person, even a loved one who's giving you criticism, how you say something to someone, it means a lot. Are you direct, blunt? Or are you positioned in a way that it can be encouraging and it can be respectful, and it can empathize with them, right? So I mean, like typically it's like, and it gets into more human psyche and stuff, or even looking at it like parents and talking to children, right? Where you can, you can help set up expectations for the behavior you want from your child. You can obviously encourage good behavior, condone bad behavior, but how you do that, and parenting is just one way of looking at it, but there's books on that. How there's always we can always be better parents, right? But it's the same principle to me. Because the last thing I hate is as a consumer going into engage with a brand and being spoken to like I'm a child. No this, no that, no that, no, and no, 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 no. And those negative contexts are just off-putting.
That's so
I
negative.
think classic example, and I understand the reason why a business would post this. But when it's posted, like that's one of the first things you see when you come in, or it's right behind the counter, big sign, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. That already is off-putting.
Yeah, very.
It makes me feel like I have to walk on eggshells when I'm in the store in the brand. That if I, it's like the, you know, we're both Seinfeld fans, right? It's the soup Nazi. It's that approach of you get out of line one bit, I'm going to refuse serving you. Now, I get it. I understand. You need to have that. That's a policy.
Yeah, you have boundaries.
But it does not need to be in a huge sign that is like one of the big things that so visible that everyone sees, because it shows that you as a business are not going to are looking out for yourself first.
Yeah.
And me, the customer, second. And therefore it's off-putting, because I feel like you're more interested in your business than you are me. And that may function well for business, but it does not function well for a brand, a successful brand, where it's based on, like we've talked about in the book and in a lot of our episodes, it's relational. Mm-hmm. It's emotionally connecting with your audience. It's letting them know I care about you, and I care about what you value in life, and a brand aligning itself with those things. And so if you don't watch what you say and how you say it, you can function as a business, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't fare well for developing and sustaining a successful or great brand.
Yeah, and I feel like it is how you say can really twist an entire sentence or a couple words in a totally different direction just by the tone. Or like you said, if that sign is, welcome to Joe's Coffee, and then right underneath that is we refuse.
Yeah.
we have the right to refuse
welcome.
Service. And it's like, welcome. Enjoy your
watch
stay.
What you say, do, because we'll kick you out at a moment's notice.
No soup for you.
Yeah. Example that you brought up in the book, that we brought up in the book that I love to go back to, is about the pets, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great analogy of
classic.
Yeah, where there's we're lucky enough to live, to reside in a downtown area that has a lot of stores, that storefronts that are pet friendly, and I think that's kind of more and more, especially I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like COVID and all, the quarantine era and all that stuff, a lot of people, there was a spike in pet ownership, right? People were stuck at home, so there was a huge, boost in like puppy adoptions, and the shelters were getting people to come in and take cats and dogs, because people are like stuck at home and they realize the value of having pets. And so now you come out of COVID, and now people are out and about and returning back into the bricks and mortar stores and things, and they're wanting to bring their pet along. And granted, that doesn't work in a lot of things. Personally for me, I do not like shopping for food and having some lady next to me with a cart with a big hairy dog next to it. But again, there's service dogs, and I'm not knocking all that. But I feel like in some areas, in some market spaces, perhaps we've gotten a little too lax. But there's a lot of stores that will say no pets allowed. And you brought up a good instance of like, here's how you could turn that around, turn it on its head.
Yeah, and in the chapter we talk about, it's negative right off the bat, which is always a horrible posture to take as a brand, of saying no pets allowed. And then there's actually no solution offered. So if someone was wanting to come in, there's not even a positive solution or a positive twist on it to actually go, okay, no pets allowed. But, and we brought up, you could have a little, place outside on the patio for the dogs to drink water, and maybe designate that area as the,
could be like the pooch bar. But it's letting the customer know you get the customer, you understand the customer, and therefore you're going to somehow accommodate them in the best way that you can without diverting from your policy. And again, it's not we're not saying that every business should let their pets in, or in this particular example. In any of that, what we're talking about, we're not dictating this should be your business policy. Mm-hmm. It's more about how you communicate it. And like you said, giving them options or saying it. I think, I think when we were writing this chapter, at some point you brought up a great example too with Disney, how the Disney parks when smoking, how they handled that. And I thought that was great. Why don't you recap that
Disney
again?
has two, I think we read about it the first one was if you go up to a Disney employee or a cast member and you ask them, what time does the park close? They won't say the park closes at this time. Will reverse it and say, oh, the park's actually open until whatever, 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying this, it's closed here, boom, this is a dead end, they're going, no, it's actually open until 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And then the other way is how they handled the smoking designated areas is that instead of putting no smoking all over the park, they created designated smoking areas. So if a guy was smoking, the employee could just go up and go, hey, actually, sir, our designated smoking areas over here, instead of going, hey, get out of here, you can't smoke.
Or even so much as, and maybe that's the case now, I believe, it would be, the designated smoking is outside of the park. So
I think now it is,
it's not that through the lens or the frame of this, right? It's you're saying it, and the same thing. You're saying the same thing, but you're somehow spinning it so it's not so negative, so it's more relatable to the customer.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the solution tied in there. And I think that's one part where it's like it's always you're advancing it forward rather than this cold, dry cut. Yeah.
And I think it applies to so many different things. And I was trying to think through like things to bring up. And again, if you're a consumer, how can you accommodate or be mindful of too? Again, because if you're the business owner and you're always looking through the lens of a business, then you're going to create things that, for instance, I want to be cash only, or I only want to accept card. We're only a touchless payment system here, whatever it is. What's the impact on the customer? And how do you communicate that in a way that it just lessens the blow of what you're having to say, or even be mindful. For instance, like I was thinking of things that I find off-putting, like when you have I've seen a lot of these that are doing it now, where I go in to buy a cup of coffee, or let's say I make a small purchase in a store, and they're set up with a payment system that it's slick, touchless. It's like, or Apple Wallet, whatever it is, right? It seems they're all into the tech, but they only give me an option that if I want a receipt for my transaction, I have to I can't get the only way can I have a receipt with that purchase? Just give us a mobile number or your email, and I don't necessarily want to give up my private information like that simply to have proof that I made a transaction with you, or automatically opt in to something. And I get why they do it. Yeah. From a business standpoint, it's beautiful, right? You're gathering details about every transaction you make. You can add them to a list. They can opt out down the road, but they don't look at it from the point of, maybe you have a customer that doesn't want that. Can I still get a printed receipt? And I literally had there was some place where I bought something for someone. It was like an $80 purchase for, a birthday present or something. I wanted a receipt, but I'm never going to visit the store again. I'm never going to want to purchase anything else because it wasn't for myself. It was for someone else. And I had to walk out with a receipt and go, I hope they like it, or whatever. Or, even things off-putting like, no refunds, right? Yeah. No returns, or all sales are final. Yeah. It's like all these things that it's short, it's abrupt, it can be off-putting. And I think there's ways to say those things just from a different lens. But I think if, for that customer, for that guy's like, hey, this is what I'm doing, but then to stop and think, put themselves in the customers. Would they want to be treated like that? Would they want that option?
I wrote about it on LinkedIn when it happened, but I bought toner for the office because we ran out of toner. And I go to Staples. I have to go pick it up there for some reason. Like, they won't ship it. And so I go there, I make the transaction, and I leave. And somehow they got my email. And I get back. I don't know. And then I'm like, okay, whatever. I get an email from them. And this is a little later, and it asks, we hope you're enjoying and then it has the input of the product I purchased, which is the toner. And right away, I'm like, this is so out of touch of me as the customer of I'm enjoying toner. Like this isn't something that it's a business expense. It's literally like it's ink. Like it
wasn't contextual.
No, and it was completely. I'm like, oh my gosh. When really as a consumer, it would have been so much better if Staples would have emailed me and said, hey, you bought this toner. On average, people have to rebuy toner every 30 days. Would you like for us to, either subscribe or get your refill ready for you at that next mark? Right? They would have turned it, and that's being empathetic and understanding my relation to the product and to them. But that, like you said, is like from the business standpoint of, just add them to the list and then use all these automations to just fill in the variable of the product. So it emails them right away.
Less work for the business owner.
Yeah, and it's just boom, 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 and it just goes through it. And I'm like, it's missing the point of what you should be doing as a brand. And like you said, even when places are like, oh, we accept cash at a discount versus if you want to do credit card, there's a 2% increase because of the credit card processing. And it's like that's completely writing off the convenience that credit card and digital has for the customer. And so once again, you're not thinking of the customer. You're thinking of, as the business, we'll save 2 to 3% when we take on cash and make the customer pay in cash. Which whoever has cash on them now is not the demographic that you want to be selling to, because it won't last long.
Yeah, for sure. Or even things like bathrooms.
Oh, yes.
I feel like I just get, the bane of my existence.
No, bathrooms, they reveal a lot. It's like when you meet, like you're dating someone, you meet their family or something. It tells you a lot about the person. And so bathrooms do that about a business. And how they tend to the restroom, how they address the restroom, all these different things. And I feel like that there's kind of clunkiness along the way of some of these, Starbucks is having to put in keypads and things like that because you have non-customers using it and making a mess in there and then leaving. Yeah. And so businesses have had to kind of barricade against that. But even that, it's like I've had so many clumsy experiences with brands where they're obviously not thinking about the customer's interaction with it. And beyond just messaging, it's like they'll have, here's the key, and it's usually attached to some object or something. And then you have to drag that back there, and then you go and have to unlock the door, and then you put the key, you have to find somewhere for the key in the restroom. It's just like, it's almost like it reminds me of like Larry David and what he would write about of like, it's just so, it's a nuisance almost. And it's like, that's not what you want. You want that experience for your customer of them just having to use the darn restroom. Like it's just,
and I get it, but it's like one of those things of like, think it through through the whole steps. And how do you, I think we were talking about this, and you mentioned there was like an instance where you like, there was no vacancy. And if there's two bathrooms with maybe the same key that works both, and they've got two sets of keys, but you've got one, you go in the bathroom, and the other person, they come in and they're going to use the key and open up.
They didn't know which one's occupied or which one's not
because there was no maybe the business owner or somebody hadn't thought through. Hey, if we have two bathrooms with the exact same key, right, and two keys, or maybe you have one key, then maybe we should figure out a way to intelligently be able to let someone know, hey, I'm using this bathroom. Or install a deadbolt on the other side so that if you're in the bathroom, the key, privacy. Right, you can only lock it from and unlock the deadbolt from the inside. That helps cover it, so your customer's not off put by another customer accidentally unlocking their bathroom door.
But I feel like even that, it's like, okay, the business checklist. Oh, we need to have the bathroom, need to have it stocked, toilet paper. It's like that's the business like checklist. Okay, boom, 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 did it, done. Lock it, make sure it has a lock. All right, we're good. And then it's like the brand aspect would be like, okay, what is that experience? If someone does come in, most people do pay before they use a random restroom. It's like most people have that courtesy of like, okay, I'm using the restroom. I'm at least going to buy something. Yeah. But really going, okay, what are these stepping stones as a customer, someone who just paid you is using your restroom? What does that say about you as a brand?
Yeah.
And I feel like that there's plenty of great examples of, like, we always go back to Disney, but really when you do look at these, other brands where whether it is just messaging or like you said, no refunds or final sales, like it's almost threatening to the customer.
Yeah.
And that's what's so odd about it to me is that, like you said, it feels like it's the business protecting itself and looking after itself,
which it should do. I mean,
definitely.
Should do. I get it. Right.
But it's also like that should be baked in, just like the business should make money. That should be baked in. Don't put that on like the customer of going, oh, you're using a credit card, so we got to charge you 3% more. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
Is that how this works?
I would rather, as a customer, I would rather you raise your price by $3.50 so that when I use my debit card, you're not charging me. Oh, well, it's under $10, so I'm going to charge you $3.50. It's like, that's so. It again, it's one of those things that I feel like, bake it in so that the experience for the customer is seamless, it's pleasing, and some people, most of the time I don't care, people aren't going to, okay, yeah, I get it. I totally get it, right? There's upcharges, you need a maximum amount, or otherwise it comes out of your pocket. But that's also the price of doing business.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And I think great brands forego every dollar and cent and recouping and all that stuff, because I think great brands ignore that. I mean, there's brands that invest back in and or go out of their way to to do things they didn't have to do for the betterment of the customer.
Yeah.
And it pays off.
Yeah. And
it builds a better allegiance and a better fandom of the brand, because they've made those little they've made a few little sacrifices, because then in the end it's going to give the customer, the consumer, their audience, the brand's audience, a better experience.
And it does compound. And that's what I love with businesses. It's like they'll get so stuck of thinking about the transactions. And, okay, did I make money on that transaction? Did I lose money? It's like, yeah, you want to keep this stuff in check. You don't want to be running a business where you're just bleeding completely. But it's also, brand makes you think of the lifetime value of each customer, AKA the relationship. And that's what's so great about like memberships and subscriptions, is that it changes the whole business model, where you're having to view it as, okay, this person may buy something here, or they may not buy something next month, or you look over a longer time horizon, which like we always talk about in the book and on our podcast, like brand is that long-term vision. So therefore you're looking at that whole relationship of, okay, the person's going to come, they'll buy a coffee, they'll use the restroom. Are you going to charge them for the toilet paper they use? Like it starts coming down to like, are you going to nickel and dime every single thing? Oh, you use the credit card machine, so I'm going to charge you 2%. And it's like, no, that's the cost of doing business. That's fine. But also for the convenience of your customer and them being able just to swipe their card and be done with it. That's nice. That's investing in that relationship. And that's, again, going back to the difference of it, is like business minded versus brand minded.
It comes down to tone. Again, it's not a matter of what you say, but how you say it. And making sure that how you're saying it aligns itself with the personality of your brand. Yeah. If you have a very serious, luxurious brand, you're going to communicate something to the consumer, your audience, in one way, versus if your brand is playful, whimsical, and maybe even a little sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek and kind of, snarky. Yeah. Right? And has some attitude, playful attitude with the customer.
Sassy.
Perfect word. Perfect word. If you have a sassy brand, then communicate your policies to your customer in a sassy way that still conveys you're serious, but it's how you're saying it. Match it. Make sure it matches up with your brand. If you have a sassy brand, but then you're communicating in a very serious and just a serious tone, cold and serious and impersonal tone, it's not aligning with the brand, and it helps kind of break up the continuity that your brand has. And we've talked about brand being consistent. Our first episode was brand clarity. Yeah. Well, here's where you create unclarity, is when you're, showing different personalities. Yeah, and it's different. Your voice, your brand voice we've talked about it, is kind of like, is everything for brand. It's how you communicate visually, verbally, audibly, and making sure all those things align. So again, it's not a matter of what you're trying to communicate, but how you do it. And that even blends into subject matters we've talked about before with the level you're talking to your audience. If you're talking to the smartest person in the room or the least smart person in the room. Yeah. Right? And educating them on your brand and your products and your services, or assuming that they have a base knowledge of things, because that's the type of audience you want, Yeah.
And I feel like a good example is what Amazon had to do recently with Prime, of raised their rates on it. And Amazon is associated with value, free shipping. It's a win, right? And before they raise their rates, they just pack in tons and tons of value. And so they're throwing in the live sports. They're doing all these things where they're adding more original content and just adding in the perks to Prime. And then they approach the customers, go, hey, we're gonna have to raise the rates, but they don't blame it on anything. Don't blame it on inflation or even talk about it. They just talk about all the great things that they're adding in. And then they go, oh, and this is the new rate. And so then the consumer is faced with the language that Amazon chose of all this positive. It's not negative. It's just adding in the value. Look how great of a deal this is. And this is the rate that you're paying. Oh, wow. You get all this for just whatever it is now. And again, they just like Disney, it's like they're taking that stance of using the right language, the right tone, the right expression to get that across so the brand does stay positive. It's not this negative, we're having to update our privacy terms and our rate. Now you're paying this. And it's totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. Recently my cell carrier raised their rates across the board on everything. And they justified in an email to me that it was because of, further developing in our infrastructure and all these other things. And I'm like, you know what? If those costs eat into your profits, so be it. But don't make me absorb the bulk of that new infrastructure, whatever it is you're doing. Like again, it's that idea. They were probably better off not explaining it to me that way.
Oh yeah.
And I would have been I think received a little bit more. If anything, I'm just going, and then I find myself questioning, am I with the right provider? There's ways to just, again, you're doing everything through the mind, ears, and eyes of your consumer, your audience. Yeah. And that is helping to guide some of your decisions, particularly the ones which entail you to engage with the customer. There's companies that do that well. Like Disney, you've talked about all these nuances that Disneyland does, and you look at, I'm not a Disneyland employee, so I don't know what kind of handbook they have. I don't know what kind of training procedure they have. But they clearly have set the bar for how to do it well. Oh, yeah. Because without a doubt, every employee in the park runs off the same script. The training is so well done. And that's behind the scenes. Yeah. That's something that the consumer doesn't need to know about, doesn't need to know, right? Yeah.
And it's part of the magic. Like
right.
It really is. It's seriously part of I think for the experience of the customer, seeing how that works. The business shouldn't be talking like that of no returns or no refunds. It's so
all sales are final.
Yeah, it's so just disgusting. And there's no treat your customers like humans. And again, I think that's what Disney, In-N-Out, some of these great brands have done, where it's no, the customer is a human. Treat them that way. They have emotions. We can be empathetic and put ourselves in their shoes and lean into that in the language and our service and the overall experience of it.
Yeah. Again, it's just, and especially if we're talking about very basic things that most businesses have to engage with. If you have a very strict return policy, right? So many brands do. So many do. But if you communicate that in a way that's different than how all the other than consumers are used to hearing from everybody else, that stands out. Yeah. And if you can do it in a way that is on point with your brand and doesn't treat your customer like a little child, being they're going to be reprimanded, right? Then you're going to gain more respect as a brand. Mm-hmm. Your customer's going to want to continue engaging with your brand, and they might even go so far as to recommend your brand.
Yeah,
because you do things a little bit differently, or talk a little bit differently, that the consumer feels better about.
Yeah. Yes, I think going back to that number 66 in Brandy, it's not what you say. As a business, you have to say certain things. You have to make certain points. You have to cover your rear end so you don't get, taken advantage of. But it's also there's better and more creative ways to go about saying it, how you approach that, how you say that, what solution are you giving instead,
rather than no soup for you. Well, I think we've gone a little more in depth on that tip for now, and so hopefully you guys have gotten some stuff from this that good takeaways, and we look forward to you guys tuning in next time. So on that note, cheers.
Cheers.